The last bid he'd ever make. A widower's price for freedom. The auctioneer's voice cracked like dry timber in a winter fire, each syllable a spark that should never have been struck. The barn was dressed to look respectable. White string lights stapled along beams, mason jars grinning from the rafters, a harvest benefit banner sagging where the staple missed wood. But respectability couldn't cover the smell of hay, spilled whiskey, and something sour underneath. Fear turned into business. In the ring, a girl stood on a plywood platform in a simple blue dress too thin for the chill. Her hands were folded in front of her like she'd been told to pray. Her face was composed in the way faces get when composing is the only tool left. She was 19, someone had said, as if that number made the math cleaner. Her eyes, dark, steady, did the work her mouth wasn't allowed to do. She watched the crowd without letting her gaze land anywhere long enough to be claimed. This was not the city's black tie charity circuit. This was the county's shadow economy dressed as a prospect showcase, an old rot finding new language. Settlement of debts, arrangements, a future negotiated by people who never had to live inside the choices they made for others. At the back, near the exit that stuck when the air swelled, a black widower in a thrift store coat stood half inside the darkness and half inside the light. Marcus Holt had the posture of a man familiar with hard rooms and narrow exits. He'd come because a mechanic friend, breath-soaked in regret, had said, "There's a thing tonight." "Not right. Thought you should know." Marcus had lost his wife, Rochelle, 16 months earlier to an infection that picked a fight the hospital didn't rush to stop. He'd lost his savings to the kind of bills that arrive in stacks like threats and then grow teeth. He was caretaker to grief and to a one-bedroom apartment with a radiator that hissed like gossip. The only thing he wasn't broke in was principle, so he came. He came to witness, to stand between a sentence and its period if the room allowed. The auctioneer, slick hair, teeth that believed themselves, rattled numbers in a sing-song that made the barn sway. "We're talking futures, folks," he crooned. "We're talking opportunities." He said words like protect and provide the way a pickpocket says watch your pockets, pretending to warn, actually announcing the theft. The parents stood to the side. The mother's face was chalk over stone. The father kept swallowing like he'd swallowed a story about necessity so large it kept trying to climb back out. Marcus's hands were empty in his pockets, but his mind was full. Calls he could make. A public defender's card with a number that picked up on Sundays. The number of a reporter who'd sent him a fruit basket when Rochelle died because his op-ed about the ERs that ignore black pain had punched through. He had his phone. He had a plan that wasn't a plan yet, just a line thrown into the possibility that someone would catch it. The bids began low, the way evil pretends to be modest. A man in a green cap, winter-white beard, hands that smelled of diesel and entitlement, raised 2 fingers. 2, the auctioneer sang, meaning 2,000 cash, because dignity is always discounted when cash arrives in unmarked envelopes. Another man, navy blazer, stadium smile, lifted his chin for 3. The girl stood. She did not shake. If she had practiced not shaking, she had practiced well. The parents did not meet her eyes. Marcus felt a heat rise in the back of his neck, the heat of someone else's blood pressure accidentally becoming yours. He took a breath, counting backward from 7 the way Rochelle had taught him when the hospital put him in a waiting room and called it care. The auctioneer's chant quickened. 5, do I have 5? 5 to the gentleman, thank you, sir. 6? 6 to the back, 6.5? Yes, 7! The barn's lights wobbled once as if the circuit objected. Marcus lifted his phone, thumbed the camera on without letting his arm announce it, and caught frames like life rafts. The girl's steady eyes, the banner's lie, the auctioneer's grin, the hands reaching without touching. He texted the reporter a photo and 6 words. "You want a story? Come now." 3 dots appeared, then, "Where?" He sent the pin. He didn't wait for the follow-up. If you wait in rooms like this, the room makes decisions for you. 10, the man in the green cap said, savoring the shape of possession. The girl's hand moved, barely. Marcus saw it because he'd learned to watch micro-motions in rehab sessions when Rochelle's fingers had tried so hard to convince nerves to remember. It was the smallest refusal. Her fingers opened like a flower that bloomed in defiance of frost and then closed again, a private yes to herself. 10-5? The auctioneer sang. Marcus let the anger pass through like lightning and looked for the ground to send it into. He reached into his pocket and found nothing but lint and a pawn ticket. Rochelle's wedding ring, pawned last week to keep the lights on when the landlord tipped his chin toward the breaker. The paper was thin, a trapeze with no net. It held a promise he intended to keep. Get it back. He could not buy a person, and he would not pretend to. He could, however, break the spell of this room by telling a better story louder than theirs, and by moving first. He lifted his voice. "House," he said calmly, as if ordering a sandwich. The room tilted toward him. The auctioneer frowned. "What's that?" "House bid," Marcus repeated. "I'm offering shelter, not ownership. She leaves with me, we go straight to a station, and every damn camera in the county comes with us. Price is that you all get to explain why you dressed this up as charity." Quiet fell like ash. Then the room broke into nervous laughter, the kind that tries to make something small because it cannot make it right. "Sir," the auctioneer said, carrying the syllable like a police baton, "this is a family arrangement." "Then the family can arrange to stop," Marcus replied, still calm. "Because I'm the one with a reporter on the way and a live stream about to start." He lifted his phone slightly, enough to make the LED wink. "And a list of legal statutes that sound very different when they're read out loud." The man in the green cap sneered. "You can't afford this." Marcus smiled without showing teeth. "That's why I'm offering a price you can't afford either. Daylight." Marcus Holt had grown up learning to fix things that other people threw away. Radios that coughed static. Bicycles with frames that looked like questions. He had hands that liked problems and a patience earned by men who watch women work miracles and call them Tuesdays. He was 20 when he met Rochelle by the vending machine outside a free clinic, both of them counting coins in that small ritual where shame and math shake hands. She laughed when the machine ate his quarter. He kicked the bottom left corner like his uncle taught him. Snickers dropped like grace. They married 3 years later in a park with a baker's dozen of friends and a pastor who believed in vows the way some men believe in stock tips. Rochelle was a library aide who smelled like paper and peppermint. Her laughter was the noise God made when he realized humans were ridiculous but worth it. Then came the fever that argued with antibiotics and won. The waiting room where Marcus learned what it felt like to be turned into furniture by nurses too tired to see and administrators too practiced at not seeing certain kinds of pain. He wrote about it when the grief's first wave let him breathe. Wrote like he was trying to build a bridge back to the person he'd been when Rochelle still took up half the bed. The op-ed went where words go when they've been sharpened by someone who lost something important. It cut. People wrote to thank him for naming their invisible. A reporter called. A councilman pretended to care. A med student cried on a voicemail and then sent him socks because grief makes people do polite, odd things. Marcus took the attention and spent it where it could purchase change. But attention doesn't pay rent. He took shifts wherever the hands that fixed things were welcome. On ladders changing bulbs for a landlord who tipped in jokes. Under sinks that didn't want to be obedient. In garages with oil that taught you new swear words in your sleep. He watched how rooms read him, the way some store clerks shadowed him like he was a rumor, the way a bank manager tilted her head like she was listening for credentials that would make his requests less ambitious. He learned to slow his vowels for certain offices and to let the anger be data rather than gasoline. "Every room has a price," Rochelle had said once, not meaning money. "You either pay it or you insist on a different currency." He'd taken that line and kept it, a pocket scripture. The county where the barn stood had two faces like many counties do. Daylight fairs with kettle corn and toddlers and a deputy with a public smile. Night markets where debt and desperation put on tired lipstick and kissed shame in the dark. The harvest benefit had once been a legitimate thing. A pie auction with school kids judging crusts and a quilt that smelled like history. Then the plant closed. Then the church split. Then folks who liked the feel of power started arranging futures for girls whose families had more bills than exits, and boys who could swing hammers without asking questions. They moved money in envelopes and called it keeping the community intact. They counted assets and debts and daughters. They rationalized with old words, honor, provision, tradition. that sound holy but can be used to build cages. Marcus didn't have a daughter. He had grief and the memory of a wife who would have burned a barn down with her eyes rather than let a girl be priced. His mechanic friend had told him that a good family, just in a bind, was seeking help. Marcus had heard the translation, they were selling proximity and control. He learned the girl's first name, Asha, from a whisper behind him, the whisper's owner saying, "Pretty thing," as if pretty were a natural resource, and he held the deed. Asha's parents weren't villains from a pamphlet. They were tired, embarrassed, and trapped by a mortgage that ballooned, a medical debt from a surgery that saved a younger sibling but not the house, a father's pride scabbed over by failures, a mother's hope blackmailed by cousins with better luck who'd offered loan help at 30% interest. They'd come to the barn because someone told them God made ladders like this. They had mistaken a hole for a ladder. Asha's backstory had not been invited to speak. She'd been a physics scholarship finalist whose acceptance offer came with too little money and a Campus 3 bus transfers away. She'd been studying torque on YouTube at 2 a.m. and sleeping in classes at 9. She'd been told by a teacher that girls like you have to be realistic, and by another teacher that girls like you are exactly what we need. And she was trying to make those sentences add up. She'd said no to a boy who said no was rude. She'd said yes to tutoring that paid cash and watched as men twice her age called her Miss in a way that tasted like a dare. She was a few weeks past her 19th birthday and had already learned that some days you are a person and some days you are a plot device in other people's stories. Tonight she'd come because her mother said, "We are only talking," and because 2 uncles had shown up at the house with envelopes and eyes that looked past her. She wore the blue dress because it made her feel like she could breathe. The barn had opinions about black men who interfered with white men's transactions. Marcus knew this because he'd been a black man in rooms where white men expected him to participate in rituals built on their comfort. He evaluated exits. 1 door stuck, 1 door unobserved behind a stack of hay bales, 1 window high but real. He cataloged faces: the auctioneer, performer, green cap, dangerous, navy blazer, coward in a pack, deputy near the wall, calculating, 3 men with the posture of people who like to be near violence. He took another breath and texted a second person, a public defender whose fridge calendar had his cell number written under "Be kind to nervous people." "Illegal auction," he typed. "Live stream imminent. Need language." The reply came fast. "Record. Say coercion, not sale. Say unlawful contract. Say duress. Show faces. Don't provoke deputies. Ask girl on camera if she consents to leave." Marcus filed the script. He also texted a third number, Pastor Dell, whose sermons got more real when he lost half his congregation for telling the truth about whose sins were expensive and whose were fashionable. "If I say come," Marcus wrote, "you coming?" "I don't do barns," Dell replied, "but I do sheep." "Say when." Marcus lifted his phone another inch and hit go live. The red dot blinked. He brought the mic close to his chest to keep wind noise down. "County folks," he said, voice steady like screws when they bite, "I'm at a harvest benefit where a 19-year-old is being offered to settle a debt. This is coercion. This is an unlawful contract. This is a crime," a man nearby said. "Turn that off," with the authority of someone who thinks commands make facts. Marcus angled away without retreating, framing Asha and the banner. He kept his voice low to not spook a deputy who looked bored because boredom is how some uniforms hide appetite. He didn't yet know what his next sentence would be. He knew he was in it now. The auctioneer's patter faltered. He had not prepared for a broadcast. "Sir," he said, smile stiffening like frosting in a freezer, "if you don't put that away, we will ask you to leave. This is a private event." "Private crime," Marcus said, still not loud. The deputy peeled himself off the wall and ambled over with the vibe of a man hoping to cash a favor later. "Phone's down," he said. "For everyone's safety." Safety was doing a lot of work in his sentence. Marcus angled the camera to catch the deputy's badge number without turning the lens into a fight. "You enforcing a code or a law, officer?" he asked. The deputy's eyes narrowed. He recognized the tone, not belligerent, not meek, legal. Move along, he said. Or I'll detain you for disturbing. Which statute? Marcus asked. He didn't smile. He kept the deputy in the math. Disturbing? Peace, the deputy tried. Pastor Dell would later say that was when the Holy Spirit snorted. The auctioneer, eager to retake control, turned to Asha's father. Sir, shall we continue? The father looked like a man at the bottom of a well who had been suddenly handed a mirror. He swallowed. His wife's hand trembled around his forearm, a Morse code that said, please, please, please. He nodded, tiny, cowardly, overwhelmed. The green cap lifted 2 fingers again. 11. The room, chastened by the deputy's presence, tried to act like markets make morals. That's when Marcus moved. He stepped into the light, steady as a metronome, and addressed Asha directly. Do you consent to leave with me? He asked. The barn's breath left. The deputy stuttered. The auctioneer flapped. Asha looked at her mother, who closed her eyes. Asha looked at her father, who did not. She looked at Marcus, at his thrift coat and his grief barely disguised as purpose, at the camera's red eye blinking solidarity. She measured the consequences. A mother who might be punished by family, a father who might get worse before he got better, a county that would know her name. She measured the alternative. A car ride to a stranger's house, her name changed to mine for a man who would call the arrangement something pious. She straightened. Yes, she said, quiet like a fuse. Marcus didn't touch her. He didn't do anything that could be edited to fit a lie later. He said into the mic, she consents. And then to the deputy, you gonna arrest a man for walking a consenting adult out of a barn? The deputy spluttered at the grammar of the new reality. He looked to the auctioneer, as if MCs could overrule consent. The auctioneer looked to Greencap, who looked like rage wearing a grin. You ain't taking what I paid for, Greencap said. He took a step, then another. Men near him moved, not yet hands out, but hands ready. Marcus flicked his eyes to the exit that stuck and decided to make that door a character. Asha, he said, you go now. She stepped off the platform, legs remembering stairs. She walked toward the exit, slow enough to not spook a uniform, fast enough to claim the choice. The deputy reached as if to intercept. Bad habit, not plan. Asha lifted her chin. Officer, she said, nursing's older cousin in her voice, don't put your hands on me. The deputy's hand paused in air, a cartoon that had to reconsider its next frame. Marcus kept the camera up and the tone even. Folks online, he said, please note, badge number 3111 tried to block a consenting adult's exit from a coercive contract. The deputy's hand retreated like it had been introduced to electricity. The barn turned into noises, a chair leg dragging, a cough, a whisper that had the shape of the N-word, but swallowed itself when the phone panned. Pastor Dell texted, at the road. The reporter, 2 minutes. The public defender, stay narrating. Do not argue, walk. Marcus took the advice literally. He nar walked. Asha is leaving, he said. She has consented to leave. We are exiting a private property that is hosting an unlawful coercive sale. The auctioneer finally lost his stagecraft. Grab him, he spat to no one and to everyone. That was when the barn revealed which men wanted to be good and which wanted to be right. 2 stepped in front of Green Cap, palms open. Don't, one said, a high school coach who'd watched too many boys turn their fathers into lessons. You want cameras on your kids? Green Cap swore the kind of swear that likes to be seen. He stopped anyway because even men like him do budget math when the line item is reputation. Marcus and Asha reached the exit. It stuck. Push left, someone offered from the shadows. Asha pressed the left edge. The swollen wood yielded with a cough. Cold rushed in with a relief that felt like oxygen after smoke. Outside, snow took up space like 1,000 small witnesses. Asha stepped into it and kept stepping. Marcus followed, turning the camera to catch faces in the doorway. Auctioneer pale as uncooked meat, deputy swallowing procedure, mother shaking, father bricked up behind his eyes. The reporter's car's headlights cut the lane like truth arriving. A second car, Pastor Dell's beat-up sedan, slid to a stop. Dell got out, scarf half on, eyes taking in a story he would tell carefully and often. Get in, he said to Asha, but did not pull, did not herd. She got in. Marcus opened the passenger door, kept the camera rolling, and narrated his own body. I am getting into a vehicle with Asha, who consented to leave. We are headed to the precinct to file a report for coercion and duress. Lawyer on speaker. The deputy followed them into the snow as if proximity could be influence. You can't just, he began. The reporter trained her phone on him. Officer, are you preventing a consenting adult from reporting a crime? She asked, bright with that specific television hunger that occasionally aligns with justice. The deputy blinked. He remembered a manual he hadn't read in a while and took a step back. Drive safe, he said, the rest of his career begging him to round this off. The auctioneer shouted something about trespass and contracts. The wind ate it and turned it into a lesson. Paper that cages people burns when enough eyes look at it at the same time. They pulled onto the lane. Asha's breath fogged the windshield. Marcus, still live, turned the camera to himself. If you're watching, he said, no one freezes tonight. Not bodies, not choices. If you've ever been told your future is a room you can't leave, I need you to know, doors stick. But they open. The comments swarmed. Hearts, prayers, threats, advice. An auntie somewhere shouting, "Get them names, baby!" He ended the stream when the precinct's brick facade rose like a promise and a dare. The desk sergeant had seen worse and had names for it. He looked at Asha's blue dress, at Marcus's coat, at the reporter who came in like a thunderclap, and at the live's afterglow on 3 phones walking. He sighed the sigh of men who run small forts in big storms. What's the complaint? He asked. Asha swallowed and spoke like someone returning to a language she knew before fear. Coercion, she said. Duress. Attempted unlawful contract. Witnessed by a deputy. The sergeant's eyes ticked. Which deputy? She added, surprising him with her preparedness. Badge 311. Marcus texted the public defender at desk. The defender texted back, ask for a DV victim advocate. This qualifies. The sergeant, to his credit, moved a binder closer. Advocate on call, he said into a phone. We'll take statements. The deputy arrived a minute later with the face of a man who knew he had been handed a test with his name already filled in at the top. He muttered something about private event. The reporter's camera in his periphery made him choose sentence carefully. I didn't witness coercion, he said. I arrived after arrangements were made. The sergeant raised one eyebrow at the phrase arrangements like it had just confessed a crime. And when a citizen said a 19-year-old consented to leave, he asked. The deputy looked at his boots. Allowed. He tried to make allowed sound like a policy rather than a retreat. The advocate arrived, black woman, 40, practiced kindness that didn't treat women like glass. She took Asha to a quiet room. She did the things, offered water and a blanket, asked the right questions in the right order, brought forms that looked less like traps than usual. Do you have a safe place tonight? She asked. Asha looked at Marcus, then at Pastor Dell hovering in the doorway like a punctuation mark that refuses to be a period. I don't want to go home, Asha said. I love my mother. I do not want to go home. The advocate nodded. We can arrange an emergency bed, she said. And we can go get your mother tomorrow with supervision if you want belongings. You're an adult. That part matters. Asha's shoulders dropped half an inch the way shoulders do when the air is finally trustworthy. In the hall, the auctioneer arrived with a lawyer whose suit tried too hard. This was a misunderstanding, the lawyer said, aiming the sentence like a pressure washer at the mess. A family discussion that got televised. The sergeant did not blink. The family discussion involved bidding, he said. The lawyer said, cultural. The sergeant said, criminal. The deputy said nothing. Green cap didn't show. People like him prefer shadows when the law wears glasses. Asha gave her statement. Marcus gave his. The advocate made copies of paper that had kept too many women hostage over time and tonight might keep one free. The public defender arrived in jeans and apology for his breath. He shook Marcus's hand like they had just lifted something heavy together. He asked the right questions, took down the right names, wrote the right sentences in a complaint that would later make a DA sigh and realize she would need to do a press conference that wouldn't insult anyone's intelligence. In the quiet room, the advocate looked at Asha's hands. You shaking now? She observed gently. Asha tried to laugh and couldn't. I think my body held still too long, she said. It's catching up. Let it, the advocate said. Then sleep. Tomorrow we think again. And them? Asha asked, meaning her parents, meaning the men in the barn, meaning every story she'd been told about obedience disguised as duty. We'll handle what's ours, the advocate said. The state has words for what's theirs. What about what's mine? Asha asked, 19 in her mouth and 90 in her eyes. We'll keep that, the advocate said. We'll make it bigger. At 3 a.m., statements were filed. The DA's office was woke up by the public defender's persistence and the reporter's persistent attempt to make the email subject line irresistible. Illegal auction, video attached, victim at precinct, worked. The deputy was told to go home and not write his own narrative in a report without supervision. The sergeant shook his head at the phrase arrangements and, to his better angel's credit, wrote alleged coercion instead of misunderstanding. Pastor Dell took Asha to the emergency bed, a women's shelter with warm cots and a night worker who had a book club smile and a tattoo that said, "Try again." Marcus walked them in and said to the night worker, "She's got people." The night worker nodded, not measuring him, just writing down numbers in the right boxes like numbers can sometimes be guardians. Asha turned to Marcus in the harsh fluorescence that make humans blurry and therefore honest. "Why did you come?" she asked. Marcus thought of Rochelle asleep with a fever Marcus didn't yet know meant trouble, of the waiting room, of the vending machine, of the way grief sits in a man's coat like a roommate who never does dishes. "Because someone texted me about a thing," he said. "Because I had a wife who liked to see people leave rooms that didn't love them." "Because you said yes." She nodded once. It was a grown nod, agreement among equals. "I'm scared for my mom," she said. "We'll go get her right," he answered. "In daytime. With cameras. With the advocate." Day came like a pale apology. The DA called the sergeant and said words with spine. The reporter's segment aired with faces blurred except the deputy's badge and the auctioneer's mouth, which had admitted too much on tape. A church group started a fund online before breakfast. Another church group tried to shame them for it. The internet did what it does, half lovely, half feral. Asha slept. Marcus ate a stale donut with Pastor Dell in a parking lot that smelled like old rain, and both men agreed it was the best donut they'd had in months because exhaustion makes stale things holy if they're victory adjacent. Then they went to Asha's house with the advocate, 2 officers whose training had stuck, and a lot of daylight. Asha's mother opened the door with eyes swollen like she'd wrestled nightmares all night and lost by points. She saw Asha and crumpled, then straightened because there were witnesses. The advocate spoke first, language careful and alive. "We're here to collect Asha's belongings with her consent," she said. "We can discuss resources for housing and debt counseling after." The mother nodded. Shame and relief fighting a duel, neither could win quickly. The father stood behind them, face a knot. "This is our business," he said, last night's script wobbly in sunrise. The officer with the steady voice said, "It was until you made it ours." He didn't enjoy the line. It was just true. Asha walked past her father without cruelty, moved to her room, and packed with the efficiency of someone who's imagined this night as a drill for months. She folded the blue dress like a relic and put on jeans and a hoodie that smelled like soap and library. She tucked in the scholarship letter she'd hidden behind a dresser mirror because looking at it hurt. She took a physics notebook that had slept under her pillow like a guard dog. When she came back to the living room, her mother held out an envelope, cash and a note she'd written in a rushing hand at 4 a.m. "I am sorry. I choose you." Asha took it and hugged her mother. "Come with me," she whispered. "Not yet," her mother said, voice packed with decades. "Soon." The advocate put a card in her hand that said, "Soon can be today." The father said nothing. He was learning that silence could finally be useful. He sat. He cried, but he kept it quiet because men like him were trained to leak privately. The town adjusted like a neck that slept wrong. The barn's owner posted a statement about being misled by the nature of the event. The auctioneer hired a PR firm that told him to shut up. Badge 311 got a suspension and an invitation to training where inconvenient phrases like implicit bias would be said by a woman who would not let him hide behind laughter. Charges were filed, not the kind that start revolutions, but the kind that make certain men hesitate before renting a barn for a crime. The DA called it coercion in an unlawful agreement and added conspiracy because old crimes prefer company. The cultural defense did not play well against the video's audio. Numbers sung over a girl who had not been asked to sing back. The public defender wrote op-eds about debt, despair, and the way communities sell their children when they ought to be selling their old assumptions. The reporter did segments that threaded dignity instead of hype, and then moved on as reporters must. But the clip stayed, a small warning to other barns that fancy lights cannot bleach rot. Asha moved into a spare room at Pastor Dell's house as a stopgap. He and his wife had 1,000 rules and one main one. We use our house to get you to your house. The women's shelter found her a longer-term bed. A scholarship foundation called after watching the video and said the quiet part out loud, "We missed you once. We won't twice." They funded a commuter stipend and a laptop that booted fast. A professor in physics wrote a handwritten note that said, "Torque owes you an apology. We'll fix it." Marcus returned Rochelle's ring to the pawn, counter 2 weeks later with money that came. From people who aren't rich but are generous and right. Notes in the memo line like, "For the barn girl and for your wife who changed me." He slid the receipt into his wallet next to the pawn ticket, which he didn't throw away because he was the sort of man who honors the paper that carried him through. He kept visiting the precinct when he had to, the shelter when he could, the church when Pastor Dell threatened to send deacons to fetch him. He fixed a radiator for the advocate's office pro bono and refused the cookies she tried to push on him, except he took 2. Asha started class the next fall with a backpack that didn't squeak and the knowledge that leaving a room can change a town's accent. She cut her hair shorter because sometimes a body needs to look like the present to stop hearing the past. She joined a study group with 2 girls who were tired of being the only brown dots in rooms full of, "We didn't mean it." She Skyped her mother during office hours and taught her how to say interim plan to relatives who still tried to speak old languages of shame. She sent Marcus a photo of her notebook when she finally made sense of a problem with a line underneath that said, "We stick, then we open." At Christmas, the barn was rented for a legitimate pie auction again. The Whisper Network had done its work like bleach and sunlight. The pies went to coaches and grandmas instead of contracts. Someone brought a framed still from Marcus's live. Asha stepping off the plywood, chin up, the lights behind her looking like a constellation that had decided to be local. They hung it near the door. People touched the glass. That night, they said, we remembered doors. Marcus visited Rochelle at the tree by the park with the pastor who believed in vows. He sat on the bench, took the ring from his pocket, and told her what happened, because some stories need to be told to the dead to feel fully true among the living. He cried, he laughed, he cussed soft. He promised to keep walking into rooms. Then he went home and slept with the kind of sleep that doesn't bargain. If you'd been Marcus at the back of the barn, what would you have done in the 3 seconds before your heart decided for you? If you'd been Asha on that plywood, what sentence would you have said to make the door listen? If you hold a badge, a gavel, a pulpit, or a checkbook, what policy can you write this week so arrangements can't dress themselves up as culture when they're just control? If this story moved you, share it with someone who believes silence is neutral. Then pick a room in your world, a boardroom, a classroom, a family chat, and add one rule. Coercion is not culture, debts are not daughters, and when a door sticks, we push left until it opens.